Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is May 24th. On this day in 2022, a mass shooting forever altered the small city of Uvalde, Texas, when Robb Elementary School became the site of one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. An 18-year-old gunman took the lives of 19 children and 2 beloved teachers, leaving families shattered, a community in mourning, and the entire nation grasping for answers. Today, we're revisiting the heartbreaking tragedy in Uvalde, examining the events leading up to the attack, the devastating failure in law enforcement response, and the voices of survivors who bravely continue to speak out. Let's get started. Nestled in South Texas, Uvalde is a predominantly Hispanic community of about 15,000 people. For generations, it has been a place where families are tightly woven together. Children ride bikes down tree-lined streets, and neighbors know each other's names. Robb Elementary School, built in the 1950s, was more than a school. It was a part of the town's identity. And historically, Robb Elementary has been a place of both learning and resistance. In 1970, it became the focal point of the Chicano civil rights movement when Mexican-American families staged a walkout to protest the firing of a popular Hispanic teacher, which just served as an early example of this community's bond. Salvador Ramos, the shooter, was a former student at Robb Elementary. At 18, he was deeply troubled. Teachers and peers had described him as isolated and angry. He struggled in school, he skipped classes frequently, and was reportedly bullied due to a speech impediment. Just after his 18th birthday, Ramos legally purchased 2 AR-15 style rifles and stockpiled more than 1,600 rounds of ammunition. In the days leading up to May 24th, Ramos posted disturbing content online. Photos of its new rifles, cryptic messages, and apparent cries for attention. Despite these red flags, no intervention came. Robb Elementary had security protocols in place. They had locked doors, a police presence, and emergency plans. But on that day, none of it would be enough. The horror began just before lunchtime. At 11:21 a.m., Salvador Ramos shot his 66-year-old grandmother in the face at their house. She miraculously survived and called 911. Ramos then stole her truck and drove toward Robb Elementary. Minutes later, he crashed the vehicle into a ditch near the school and began firing at witnesses and the building. At 11:33 a.m., Ramos entered the school through an unlocked side door. He walked into connected classrooms, rooms 111 and 112, where children were finishing morning lessons. Armed with a Daniel Defense DDM-4 rifle, he unleashed over 100 rounds in a matter of minutes. This one's going to be hard to get through. Inside those rooms, young students did everything they could to survive. 11-year-old Mia Cerrillo later testified before Congress, saying in part, quote, "He shot my teacher and told my teacher good night and shot her in the head. And then he shot some of my classmates and the whiteboard," end quote. To stay alive, Mia smeared herself with her friend's blood and played dead. She continued, quote, "I got my teacher's phone and called 911. I told her that we needed help and to send the police into our classroom," end quote. 10-year-old Samuel Salinas was also in the classroom. He said, quote, "He came in and said, 'You're all gonna die,' and just started shooting," end quote. Samuel was hit by shrapnel in his leg and played dead by lying on the floor, motionless. He said, quote, "I thought he was going to come back into the room, so I just laid there," end quote. In those terrifying moments, teachers tried to shield their students. Eva Morales and Irma Garcia Both veteran educators and mothers were killed while protecting their students with their own bodies. Outside, officers from multiple agencies arrived quickly, but what followed was 77 minutes of paralyzing inaction. Despite the presence of more than 370 law enforcement officers at the scene, no one entered the classrooms to stop the shooter until it was too late. By 11:36 a.m., heavily armed officers had arrived and were stationed in the hallway, just steps away from where the massacre was still unfolding. Yet they treated the incident as a barricaded suspect instead of an active shooter, and they waited. Inside, terrified children continued to make 911 calls. Over and over again, they pleaded for help. And help was right there, but it wasn't coming. Outside, frantic parents begged officers to intervene. Some were even handcuffed when they tried to go inside themselves. The classroom doors weren't locked. Officers had ballistic shields. They could have gone in. But instead, they waited and they did nothing while children were getting ripped apart by bullets. It wasn't until 12:50 p.m. that a U.S. Border Patrol tactical team finally breached the classroom and shot Ramos dead. By then, 21 lives had been lost. A U.S. Department of Justice report released in January 2024 described the law enforcement response as a cascade of failures. There were failures in communication, training, leadership, and courage. The report stated bluntly, quote, "Lives could have been saved if standard active shooter protocols had been followed," end quote. The days following the shooting were filled with unbearable grief. The small town of Uvalde, where everyone knows someone who was affected, became a place of memorials, funerals, and difficult questions. Arnulfo Reyes, the teacher who was shot multiple times and lost all 11 of his students, said, quote, "They sat there and did nothing for our community. They took a long time to go in," end quote. Investigations confirmed that nearly 400 officers were on site. Yet a lack of leadership, misinformation, and fear delayed the response for over an hour. In the wake of public outcry, Texas lawmakers passed the Uvalde Strong Act, a law mandating annual preparedness meetings between schools and local law enforcement, training for active shooter scenarios and stricter response protocols. I mean, it's a start. It's something, I guess, but for many families, it's far from enough. Legal action followed. The former Uvalde School District police chief and another officer were indicted for felony child endangerment. Multiple lawsuits have been filed by families of the victims, all calling for more accountability and systemic change. Robb Elementary will never reopen. The district announced plans for a new campus, Legacy Elementary, expected to open in the fall of 2025. In the meantime, makeshift memorials continue to grow outside the school, a constant reminder of the lives lost and the ones who survived. The Uvalde school shooting is more than a headline. It's a story of children who hid beneath desks. It's a story of teachers who shielded others with their bodies, and families whose lives were torn apart in an instant. It's also a story of failure of systems that were supposed to protect the most vulnerable and didn't. But amid the tragedy, there's resilience. There's Mia Cerrillo and Samuel Salinas, children who lived to tell their story. There's Arnulfo Reyes, who's still recovering but speaking out. And there's a community that refuses to forget. Their voices and the memory of 21 lives lost demand that we do better, that we listen, that we act, and we never allow silence or fear to stand in the way of protecting our children. Before we end today's episode, I want to say that I went back and counted. This is the 8th episode that I've done on a school shooting this year, and we're not even halfway through the year. And what I've covered on here isn't even a comprehensive list, but it's too many. While there are similarities and differences between each case, the thing that remains true for all of them is that ultimately, we haven't learned anything. Yes, security protocols have changed. Maybe they've improved over the years even, but school shootings are still a constant daily threat that we as a society, as an American society, have just decided to live with. And it's disgusting. And I don't have a point to this, and Lord knows I don't have a solution, but there just shouldn't be so many of these stories to tell. There shouldn't be so many children who never got to grow up, but here we are once again. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. Be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!